Well, welcome everyone. It's really great to be in this space today with you. I hope you can hear me and the sound is coming through okay, visuals as well. My name is Melis Chikalu. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently based in Côte d'Ivoire, in West Africa. I'm seeing many of you joining us in the chat, logging in, your location. Maybe you want to add to that how you're feeling as well. It's always nice to know. So for anyone who needs a bit of a visual description, I'm a Black cisgender female presenting person. I have black afro hair, a pair of patterned glasses. I'm wearing a light blue shirt and sitting in what looks like a bird cage, but it's actually my chair. I'm a transformational coaching consultant, but in this specific space, I wear my hat of program director at We Create Space. If you don't know about us, I've got a couple of things that we could share with you as a way of an introduction. But if you do know us and have been into our spaces before, welcome back. What we do is that we are a community-led platform, consultancy and collective of queer change makers on the mission to improve the lives of LGBTQ plus people around the world. And currently we support 100 plus corporate clients at varying stages in their DEI journey. And through this process of consultancy, we also design learning experiences. We produce DI insights and craft bespoke content that supports individuals with strengthening their roles as change agents within their communities and organizations. And one of the things I do love is that as a social enterprise, profit that we make goes back to fund our work within the LGBTQIA plus community with support of corporate partners. And so we provide these free events, both in person and online, such as this one, free resources, leadership development opportunities, and wellbeing solutions. So I'm quite proud to say that over the last 2 years, we've invested, we've delivered, I think, 1,000 plus events and shared experiences, and also invested over £350,000 back into the LGBTQ plus community. So a couple of things that you can do for us. Really, as you're doing right now, attend some of our events. If the topics are speaking to you, you're more than welcome. Also, please share about these events, share our social posts, some of our content, amplify the voices of our speakers as well, and some of our projects, if they also resonate with you, you know someone who might be impacted by that, and introduce it to your employer or your colleagues if you feel it's a right fit. At any point, you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to anyone else in the space who has We Create Space in the participant bar and ask for further information. Right, so I'm not going to take too long, but on today's menu, we have our panel on psychological safety. What is it? Why do I need it? It will be moderated by Marie-Hélène Tiak alongside other panelists, Obella Obo, Scott Saleh, and Nicole Simpson. Before I pass on to Marie-Hélène, just a quick piece on triggers. A bit of a warning, just to say that talking about safety at work brings us to consider all of the things that often go wrong in our shared workspaces. So from toxic culture of burnout to microaggressions to discrimination to violence and even occupational trauma. And so we may mention these experiences so that they are acknowledged and also lift the veil on what is often left unsaid in the workplace. But that being said, we encourage you to engage in this session, in the way that supports your well-being. We will share trigger warnings where needed and do our best to offer solution-focused perspectives to help drive positive change and transformation in our communities and organizations. So, got the chat there open. Keep sharing your thoughts throughout. And also the Q&A function is open. So please bring your questions if they are directed at one or multiple speakers. All right, I'm going to stop here. Marie-Hélène, it's a pleasure to have you in the space, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Miley. Perfect. Thank you so much. And welcome, everybody. So as Miley said, my name is Marie-Hélène Tiak. I use the pronouns she, her, and I am currently sitting in sunny Nice in the south of France. It's really not that sunny at all. So I promise you that it's grey and rainy. Welcome all of you to this live panel discussion where we will explore psychological safety and how it can transform our leadership to support the well-being of our LGBTQ plus colleagues and colleagues from other historically excluded groups, to create space for innovation in their everyday interactions and ensure a lasting culture of belonging. So psychological safety is feeling able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences to self-image, status, or career. People are likely to perceive psychologically safe environments as secure places where they can trust each other, and settings where there are clear, predictable patterns of behavior. Essentially, it's about bringing your whole self to work. When a psychologically secure environment is established, people are able to communicate and collaborate with ease while fostering an atmosphere of authenticity, I'll get there, and trust that often generates real innovation. In 2019, the Society for Human Resource Management released findings that revealing that incidents of workplace violence are far more prevalent than most people might think. 1 out of 7 employees don't feel safe at work. And I will let that sit with you for a while, because this, when Maëlys and I were talking, this really struck a chord with us. So while that sits with you, I will move on to the poll, because we would like you to participate and have a little bit of a think. So the first question is, what constitutes the most important aspect of a psychologically safe environment for you? Is it trust, empathetic leadership, role models, or safe spaces? And the second question is, overall, do you feel like your current work environment supports a culture that rewards vulnerability? Absolutely, we're getting there. I don't think so, and definitely not. And I'll give you some time to answer these questions. Perfect. So I think we're getting some answers through. Let me just have a look. I'll give you another couple of seconds just to make sure that everybody has had a chance to vote, but it looks like everybody's voted. So that's really interesting, actually, way ahead with 55%. The most important aspect of psychologically safe environments is trust. And the least important is role models. That's really interesting, because I feel that one goes with the other. So that's really interesting. And for the second question, which is also really positive, and I'm going to take this as a positive, 64% of you said that we're getting there in terms of, you know, your current work environment supporting a culture that rewards vulnerability. So that's heartening to see that, you know, organizations are moving towards that, and that makes me very happy. So thank you all for voting. And now I'd like to invite our incredible panelists to join me and introduce themselves. And I am going to pick on Obella first, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Obella Obo. My pronouns are he, him. And I am really excited to be in this conversation with you all today. I was saying to our group of panelists earlier, I don't know how to exactly explain my role, and I was given the beautiful phrase of multi-potentialite. But I have a mental health background. I'm a therapist part-time, and I do a wide range of DEI services. And so that's sort of what I'll be bringing to the work today. Super excited to join everyone.
Thank you, Bella. Nicole, would you like to come on next?
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, my name is Nicole Simpson. My pronouns are she, her. I am director of DE&I for RAP, which is an Omnicom agency within the Omnicom Precision Marketing Group. Another hat I wear is as one of the members of the executive leadership team for Black Together, which is Omnicom's first global Black employee resource group. I'm incredibly excited to have this conversation with y'all today, because I think that without psychological safety, we can't do any of the things that we've been charged to do to really create a workplace where we can show up as our full authentic selves. So I'm really, really excited to have this conversation. I already have my notebook out to take notes, and just really thankful for y'all being here, for showing up, and for participating in the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. And last but not least, Scott.
Hi, friends. I'm Scott Sally. I use he, they pronouns. I'm a queer, non-binary, neurodivergent person coming to you from London. And my corporate role, my job as it is now, is to lead our sustainability strategy for Dentsu, which is a global communications and marketing group. When I say sustainability, I mean environmental as well as DEI, and putting well-being and people as the foundation of all of that. So I hope to bring some experience of how do we make psychological safety come to life? How do we make it real in wherever you are, where the workplaces you are? Hopefully, share some things that have worked for us and things where we've stumbled that maybe you can learn from. Thank you.
Brilliant. Very excited. So let us kick off then. So in 2013, Deloitte published the report Uncovering Talent, a new model of inclusion. Within this work, they highlighted the notion of covering up some aspect of one's identity whilst in the workplace, masking up and self-censoring. 61% of respondents reported covering at least one aspect of themselves while at the office. For LGBTQ plus individuals, it is 83%. So my first question is, are organizations conducive to psychological safety? Obela, can I kick off with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The easy answer is no. But I think that the sort of larger point here is organizations are living, breathing organisms. They are a collective of all of the brains and bodies that are inside of them. And that means that they are susceptible, or even honestly, truly byproducts, progenies of the same social engineering that we have. And that social engineering is not geared towards safe environments, right? We are conditioned to put ourselves away. So much of the work that I get to do on a regular basis is helping people rediscover themselves. And I think consequently what that means is that organizations have to rediscover the ways that they can be against the backdrop of these really harsh social conditions that are very much structured for them to not be able to do that thing. And it's going to take a lot of work. And I think that that's why this conversation feels so urgent, because we know how much work that is going to take. We know how hard it is to get to know ourselves, let alone to change, which means that we really got to start getting into it now. So, yeah. Okay.
And Scott, what is your answer to this question?
So I would select the word they can be. I'm still struggling with inconsistency, not just in my organization, but when I speak with other people across my broader network, whatever country, whatever industry they're coming in, it's inconsistency. And I feel that that's because policy does not always match practice. And I don't feel that it should be dependent on one's line manager or head of team to dictate one's experience. But unfortunately, that's still too much the case. I personally have had excellent experiences. I've had other people in the organization share theirs. The first time I wore a dress was at work. It wasn't at home. It wasn't in my friends group, because actually I felt safer at work expressing that part of my gender than I did even with my family and friends. And that was quite a huge transformational realization, because I guess I felt that we had put enough of the work in. I felt like, okay, actually, this is a place that I can, hey, I'm gonna try this on. Oh my gosh, this feels scary. But actually, no, it doesn't. It's been 15 minutes and no one's thrown anything at me. It's also a really joyful experience when people send me a message saying, can we talk? I want to transition at work. I want to come out at work. I want to, whatever it is. Because that demonstrates that we actually have put in enough work to make them feel safe to do so. But yeah, coming back to this point of inconsistent experiences, I think that's still where the work needs to be done, because I feel like a lot of companies have come quite far in terms of developing policy. But to Abella's point around it's living and breathing, it will shape and change. And I think something that I like to explore further with the panelists later, and I know we will, is like, okay, but what is therefore the role of leadership, and how can we as queer leaders coach them who are potential allies, who are not, queer themselves, but are, working with us to embed this in the organization. How do we help them understand their role? How do we keep the pressure on them? Because we cannot do all the work ourselves. It's not fair. We already are having enough struggles, whether that's different systemic challenges, different intersections that we're challenged with. But I think our role can be to support our leaders to understand what they need to do and then keep them accountable.
Absolutely. And
Bella wants to jump in.
Oh, sorry. If I can just add one more thing on top of that. I think the other layer there is taking advantage of the opportunity. So to your exact point, we spend so much time at work. And if that work is a space that is conducive to our self-exploration, which then is conducive to our innovation, which is improving our work ethic, which is creating a better work environment, then in those 8+ hours that we spend in or related to work, we're like genuinely evolving. And that's 100% beneficial to the folks who are inside of the organization.
And I think there's the moral case, it's the right thing to do, but there's a huge business case that actually I love weaponizing. I get out my business case bat and I'm like, you say that you want to be a high-performing talent, high-performing organization, you want to reduce retention, you want all these things. Cool. This gives you that. If you have people who are covering the core parts, the beautiful parts, the innovative, creative, magical parts of who they are, how do you expect them to do their best work when all of that mental energy, all that cognitive load is just getting drained, all this energy leaks? You can tell I'll get worked up, so I'll pause there.
But I love your story, and I love the fact that that you felt so comfortable to be your authentic self at work, and I think that's incredible. And it kind of brings me on to my next question, that when you're creating a more inclusive and safe workplace, it's critical to take an approach that fully considers the additional burden of stigma that employees from historically excluded groups face through education, courageous communication, inclusive policies, etc. So why is intersectionality so important, and how can we ensure it remains at the forefront of our strategies to implement psychological safety? Nicole, I'm going to ask you if you could share some best practices.
I need to schedule a follow-up to this because, Scott, I have so many questions for you. So we need a part 2 already. So I think that number one, we're talking about being able to bring your full self to work. And I think that one of the things that gets missing from that conversation is about how many different parts of our identities we are trying to bring to work. And so, Scott's experience as a white person is not the same as Obella's experience as a Black person, right? And so understanding that although they have 2 different experiences, that the intersectionality, our humanity, is what connects us all, right? And being able to bring the conversation back there. So to me, intersectionality is highlighting our humanity and helping us to understand that we are not just one thing. I am not just a Black woman. I am also Latina. I am also undiagnosed, probably neurodiverse. I am also the parent to a child who is queer. So understanding that we wear all of these different hats and how that enables us to show up and how we bring all those things. And so it's important for our work environment to support us truly bringing those things. And to me, that means a couple of things. So number one, creating an environment where we encourage people to be self-aware of themselves. That's completely important, because if you don't understand what you are bringing to the table and how you are interacting with others, you can't understand how you fit into the larger ecosystem, right? So understanding who you are and giving people a basis for that. And to truly create inclusive environments that create cultures of celebration across all facets of diversity, and encouraging open dialogues, respect, active listening, etc., within that container of creating that inclusive environment. I think continuing education is incredibly important, right? Because I think that one of the things that we've discovered, at least I've discovered over my last 3 years, is that sometimes people are really afraid to ask questions, and people are really afraid to wade into the difficult topics because they just don't know. And so the more that we can give people tools and resources for how to actually go about and educate themselves, because the onus is not on the underrepresented party to educate others. Let me just emphasize that. But giving people tools on how to educate themselves, and more importantly, how to repair if they get things wrong. Because on this journey of education, you will get things wrong, and how you show up and repair when you've gotten that wrong is also incredibly important. Also making sure that as in a company, as a network, as an industry, that we're truly addressing systemic barriers, which I know is like, that's the big bad, right? We're trying to overhaul all of these systems that we have been born into, but understanding what that means from a policy perspective, understanding what that means from a practice standpoint, and really moving forward a commitment towards equitable policies and practices. And then empowering these voices, right? We get to have this powerful discussion here, but are we taking that back with us into our places of work? Are we empowering those voices to, again, build on the education, build on our connectivity and our humanity? And to me, the most important tool, I think, is actually creating and facilitating support networks for each other. So I mentioned that I lead our Global Black ERG, and that community has saved my life. I don't say that lightly. And that's why it's even more important for our group. We've been intentionally building relationships with Open Pride, which is our LGBTQ plus ERG, because we understand that there isn't a level of safety for talent of color, and also in the queer space, that intersectionality, again, there isn't much Black representation in that LGBTQ plus ERG. And so helping to bridge that gap, helping to bridge the gap with Omni Women, which is our women targeted ERG, creating some of that inclusivity there, because we've historically seen some, I don't know, I want to say, there's a lack of diversity there. Just put it there. And then to go back to Scott's point, accountability. Where's the accountability for leadership for hitting all of these things, for really creating this safe environment of trust and facilitating this intersectionality and articulating the commitment of the company to keep creating these environments? So I know that's a lot, but those are some of the high points that I've seen that can make a difference and can go to establishing that trust that Scott and Bella were referring to.
And there's so much to unpack. Thank you, Nicole. And I will need a part 3 just to unpack that answer. But I think that, what resonates with me is empowering those voices. I think that's really important. And also the importance of the ERGs. And I think that, this goes back to the safe spaces that we were talking about in the poll, right? That these spaces are important for people to feel safe and to feel like they can be themselves, and that they're with like-minded people. The presence of trust and psychological safety frees people to be vulnerable with others. And I firmly believe that as a gay woman, my vulnerability is my superpower. It is the most powerful tool I have, and I have been lucky enough to thrive in an environment of empathic leadership that has allowed me to be vulnerable. And also, incidentally, because I felt safe. But is that the chicken that came before the egg? I'm not sure, but it's something that all comes together. So my next question, and I think this, I'll ask you this question, Scott, is how can leaders better role model trust and vulnerability to facilitate a psychologically safe environment?
Thank you. So when we establish what we call our DEI Council, so our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council, which is formed of our executive leadership team and the co-chairs of our belonging networks, ERGs, another term, we told them there's a buy-in, there's an anti-in. You need to share with us your DEI story. Why are you here? Not the co-chairs. We know that. We know why they're driving this. But to the executives, this is a board level priority. It's part of our mid and long-term strategy. Why do you care? What is your personal commitment to this? And why is it meaningful to you? And making that the buy-in to enter this space made it really, really human, to come back to Nicole's word, which I really love, this idea of strip away your job title. It doesn't matter. We're humans trying to make our workplace better, our industry better, and our world better. And it was that which actually built the accountability, because it was understanding, oh my gosh, it's not just Marie-Hélène in, your position. It's I understand the pain that you've experienced in your life. I understand the struggles you've understood in your life. If Abella and Nicole shared theirs, we would connect far beyond, our little intro at the beginning, because maybe there's a fragment of your story that I feel directly, or even if I've never experienced it, I'm invited into your world. It's that compassion. And so that helped us take these people who are, can be very, very senior, maybe challenging to access for the most of the business. And it made them extremely human. And so when we were privileged enough to hear their stories, then the DEI team shared theirs. But it was, we know ours, but what's yours? And that was a really beautiful energy exchange that allows us to really come back to things, not from just a business perspective, but but the why behind this. What fires you up? Why are you showing up for hours? These council meetings, they're a big commitment. They take hours, but now that I understand the people around the table and why they're there. And so I think that is something that I would really encourage people to do is get to the why, because sometimes I find companies, they make it a mandate for senior leaders. I have, different opinions around there, but I think even if you mandate it, there still needs to be a why that goes beyond just, well, because someone told me I had to be here. I don't want that. No, thanks. Like, honestly, if it's that, then dial in. I think another thing that we can do as queer leaders is continue to validate, because it is vulnerability that we're asking our leadership to do. That takes a lot. It's fair for us to have that expectation. That is part of what they signed up to when they decided to lead a company. And we're grateful to them for that. But what we can do is we can play it back to them and say, your story helped this happen. Your sharing that helped unlock this, because I'm conscious that I speak to a lot of people, but not everyone wants to hear from me. Not everyone needs to hear from me. My story is relevant in some areas and not in others. So it's how do we bring other people and make sure that their stories are being highlighted? How do we help our leaders understand actually when to pass the mic, when to step out of the spotlight? Who on your team have we not heard of that deserves that space? So I also challenge our leadership in terms of who are you bringing with you in exclusive spaces? Whose voice is not being represented there? And I think that is something that I would want to share with as many organizations as possible, because it delivers on vulnerability, it delivers on trust, it delivers on accountability, and that's kind of what we're all needing.
Absolutely. And Abel, I'd be interested in having your perspective on this as well as a DEI specialist and therapist. What tools and practices can you also suggest to help integrate psychological safety into our daily work?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say like the easy answer is healing practices, or the simple answer is healing practices. But I've been like furiously taking notes on the side, because everything that both of you saying just, it all just resonates so well. I think, so like I said, I have a mental health background, but I've worked across a variety of industries as like a consultant and then within organizations. And a lot of times when you're having these conversations with executive leadership about making the types of tangible change that is going to like impact the most vulnerable people, like what they really need is therapy, right? Like they're just activated, right? Like it's scary, it feels accusatory, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt. And because we aren't conditioned to have the emotionally regulative skills to be able to hold two things at once, to be able to have that critical thought and that conversational agility to like learn more and not feel on the defensive, we aren't open to the change that we need to make, because it feels like a criticism of self. And so this is self-worth work. This is self-love work. This is radically empathic work, right? And that is a lot to ask. And so we really have to start to give, I love, Nicole, you mentioned continuing education. We really have to start giving ourselves the space to learn these things, because we don't have the tools. And that's okay, right? Like social engineering, we were not given the tools. We should not expect ourselves to have the tools. That would be unnecessarily cruel and critical of ourselves. But if we acknowledge that we don't have those tools and we set ourselves up with regular spaces to learn, regular spaces to process, mentioning the support networks. But then in addition to just having those spaces, making sure those spaces are properly funded, we are bringing in people who know how to actually bring about that change. We're supporting those ERG groups with the ability to seek healing outside of just them having to Google it and do a worksheet in a group, and not have any, psychological skills to manage the immense amount of trauma that's going to come into that space. And it's also about like acknowledging that trauma as not a bad thing, but as a fundamental part of the human experience, right? Like we all know that it's always something. It's always something, right? And it's like, if we acknowledge it, it actually is always something. There is a fundamental pain to this experience, right? Then we can make sure that we're building space to heal it so that those healed people can show up to the work in a much more intentional and expressive and just free and innovative way. And to the exact point, it is where the healing is where the compliance, the character, and the commerce all sort of come together, right? You might only be showing up to this because you have to show up to this. And I appreciate that, Scott, because it's very tired. However, right, if you're showing up to that space and that space is built to fundamentally heal you, right, you might get something out of it, right? But if you're here because you just want to be a better businessman, you're trying to make money, that's fine. I want to make money. I'm broke. I would like a little something in my check, right? And so that's okay if it's going to help you get more money. And it's okay if you're here because like this is just your like heart work, right? But if we center those practices around the healing, then no matter why you show up, what you get out of it will be the healing, and that healing is going to feed back into the system in a way that's beneficial to it.
I love that. And I love the idea of healing. And, I think that, this healing process is something that we all do together. And, Scott, to your point earlier about, having these spaces and being able to do all of this together and come together to heal and to be vulnerable, I think that's really important. Abella, can I just ask a follow, which isn't on the list, but I do have a follow-up question on what you said. And it's, the ERGs, the role of the ERGs, and Nicole, you've spoken a lot about this, and I completely 110% agree with you. But you talked about sort of properly funding the ERGs. So how does this conversation, how can we, because it's a question around business, it's money, and it kind of seems to sort of detract from the conversation around psychological safety. So but it's integral to it, right? So how can we sort of bring it in as well?
I think that, and I'll offer up some space to our other two guests to chime in as well, but like, I really think it's about priorities. Like I think scalably, health and healing resources are genuinely structured and built to sort of meet you where you're at, like almost across the board. Like, yeah, they can be expensive, but like, if it's a priority in your business structure, like you have the space to really fund the services, I guarantee you, especially if you're actively looking for it and you meet people who can work with you. I know, like as a therapist, I am a living sliding scale. I really try to meet people where they're at, like funds wise, because I'm committed to offering healing spaces to other people. And I think that is largely what you're going to find from people who are doing this healing work, especially if it's a genuine priority, you're communicating to them, they see the vision, they see the active interest in change. That's, as a therapist, that's what I'm looking for from clients, right? Like if you come to me for therapy, that's fine. But if you come to me because you're genuinely committed, so every time we set things, you're going to go back and do them, that change is very tangible, it's quick, it's encouraging. And so I'm going to let you pay what you have so that I can get you to that healing practice. But then the like other little layer that I'll throw on top of there is listen to the people in the space. They will tell you what they need, and they will figure out how to make it work because they want it. And so I think that we put a lot or leadership tends to put a lot of undue pressure on themselves, and they absolutely do have to do the work, right? There has to be some level of effort on their end, right? But like most of the time, the people in your organization are very committed to the goals and to themselves. And so if you properly resource them, they're just going to go do it because that's all their engine is moving.
Yeah. No,
I wanted
thank you.
to just jump in there.
Yeah,
I
of
just
course,
wanted to
Nicole.
jump in
Yeah,
there
yeah,
really
yeah.
quickly, because I think that not only are the resources are important and the company should be putting money there, but also they should be compensating the people that are leading the work.
Yes.
As a leader of not only a global ERG, but I started a Black Talent Resource Group at my previous network, still within Omnicom as well. And these groups absolutely commit to retention. They absolutely contribute to the bottom line in terms of retention, in terms of professional development, in terms of opportunities for mentorship, sponsorship, insert any other tool here. If you are properly funding your ERGs, there are vehicles for change, full stop. So that means, yes, pay for programming, but in my mind, that also means developing and compensating the leaders of those organizations as well, because that also shows the commitment, and that also shows that the company understands the value in these groups. So just wanted to shout that out, that yes, the programming is important, but compensate your leaders.
And I will absolutely take that away with my next meeting with my sponsor. Thank you, Nicole. And Nicole, I'm going to stick with you for the next one, because to pick up on one part of your identity that you mentioned earlier, that you're a parent. So what has parenthood taught you about psychological safety? Can you please share any unexpected or transferable learnings that apply in your own practice as DEI leader?
So what's interesting is that I've always struggled with the feeling of being able to show up as my full self. I have a personality that is very loud and very fun and very passionate, and that can be off-putting to people sometimes. And I'm very cognizant of that. And so I definitely try to fit the container that I'm in at any given time, right? And I'm very cognizant of that because my father was an executive at a Fortune 500, actually a Fortune probably 20, at a time when there were not people that looked like him. And he was an immigrant and also a Black man. And so he imparted to me that I was going to have to work 50% harder. I was going to have to be the best at all times, et cetera, et cetera. So as a parent, I was very mindful of, I did not want to impart that trauma onto my children, because the way that I show up is a trauma response. And I wasn't cognizant of that. So I'm a mom of 3. I have a daughter who is a freshman in college, and I have 2 sons who are 7 and 4. And all of them have incredible talents. All of them have remarkable minds and hearts. And my focus is, as a parent, on healing my own shit so that I can show up for them. Part of that healing has been understanding that just because you don't understand something about your children doesn't mean that you tamp it out. And so when my daughter came out to me, I had questions because she was a little young. And I'm like, well, I mean, attraction is fluid. So I don't know, are you sure? But my natural instinct was, my pre-healed version of me said, okay, well, I need to explain to her why being a queer Black woman is going to be detrimental to who she wants to be. And I was like, you know what? Let me not even take that. Let me show up as what I claim to be, which is an ally. And so I just listened. I also educated myself on the best way to show her support, which ultimately was just listen. And don't impart my own traumas and my own things on her, but to give her enough psychological safety to explore at the very least. So I had an incredible, incredible opportunity last year to take her with me to March in Pride. Through Open Pride, our LGBTQ plus ERG, who my boss started. My boss started that group as an ally. And being able to walk down, I'm going to get choked up, but I don't want to cry because my makeup's flawless today. Marching down Fifth Avenue with my daughter and watching her wave that equality flag. I saw joy in her that I've never seen. And I saw a sense of self and love in herself that I never got to experience at her age. And so for me, being an ally and really walking the walk meant, let me just not make it harder for her to be her. Let me facilitate this beautiful journey of self-discovery and make her feel safe to do so. And so she's absolutely why I show up the way I do, because I have an obligation to say to her, I fought to make the world a better place for you so that you can show up with all of your identities and feel like you are seen and heard and loved. So yeah, it's been a remarkable journey.
It's incredible. What an incredible story. And she's very lucky to have you. And I think that it is just amazing. And I spoke to somebody who was who works in the DI space and said, you know, our role, it's like a relay, right? And that our generation, so for the moment, we're the ones running the race, right? We've got the baton, but we're going to get to a stage where we're going to pass it on to the next generation. So when you pass the baton on to your daughter, she is going to be the most amazing version of herself that she can be, because of the race that you're running now for her. And I think that that's absolutely, absolutely incredible. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you. And I think we're getting to question time. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat, and I will ask them to our panelists.
There's so many good questions. It's tremendous.
Come through. I just want to shout out a question that I saw earlier that I wanted to go back to. It was a question surrounding, I'd have to dig and find it, but like how we find organizations that have this level of compassion. And one of those, you know, Instagram quotes that just like are the right thing that sit with you, is the be who you are so the people who are looking for you can find you. Like you have to go out there and ask for exactly what you want. And it is going to make a lot of people upset. I think that question was reflecting about being like let go for not being a good fit, which is like I went through 2 back-to-back layoffs, one because of COVID tech stuff and one because of an organization that was not practicing what they preach, and that not fit thing really hit hard. And still, like, you're better for knowing that it's not the right place for you. And like, well, it wasn't for me, but there's privilege in there that like, we need money and jobs, you know? And still, if you continue to show up as your whole self, when you find the place that feels good, it will be the right place and you'll know.
Absolutely. And it's, yeah, you'll know. It's like a relationship, right? You'll know that the relationship that you're going to have with your workplace is going to be the relationship where you're going to grow, where you're going to thrive. I can absolutely put my hand on my heart and say that Allianz has been that for me. So I've been very lucky. So some questions. So earlier, following the poll, it was mentioned trust comes with role models. Is this necessarily true? How can role models translate to trust? And when does this fail to happen? Scott, would you like to answer? And that was my comment, so I'm sorry. But Scott, would you like to answer? Pick up on my comment.
I was responding to people in the chat. Can you rephrase this question quickly for me?
Sorry. So I earlier said that trust comes with role models. And my thinking behind that was that you can only be a role model when you trust that you will have the place to be a role model and to be yourself. So I guess that answers the first bit. Is this necessarily true? And how can role models translate to trust? And when does this fail to happen?
So I feel that role models become trusted role models when you can tell that they're being really authentic, when sort of what we were sharing before, when they're making space for other people as well as them. I think they need to find the balance between role modeling great behaviors, but then sharing the space, sharing the mic, sharing the spotlight. That for me is a leader that knows when to own the room and say, this is the direction we're taking. I will not tolerate this behavior. I will challenge that bias. I will call you out on whatever homophobic, misogynist, racist behavior. That's the direction I'm setting. That's the culture I'm creating here. And now I realize that my voice is not the only one that matters. So I know when to step back and actually allow other people to come in. But once again, that's if you have their consent and if you have their tolerance and if you created the environment where they feel safe. Because sometimes I think on the flip side is what we see is as ERGs, we're often called upon to feature our community. That is not fair until the community actually feels safe that their stories will be landed in an environment where they will be respected, they'll be heard, they will be seen. People want to be respected, heard, and seen. So there's going to be an eagerness there, but they also don't want to be used as a PR tool or as a look at us, we're doing great work. No, if it's real, if it's authentic, the trust will flourish because people will be eager to share their stories. And I think the combination of holding both, they do need to come together in a harmonious way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. So I have the next question is, I could use some advice for a CEO whose behavior is sporadic due to his stress levels. Bella, do you want to, or Nicole, whoever wants to jump in on this one?
I'll let the professional go first, and then I'll chime in.
If my instinct is to say name the thing. I have noticed that what feels like a lot of stress from you, and this is how I think it's showing up in our interactions. And I want to A, ensure that is or is not the case, and B, just figure out how I can better impact our exchange. I am also saying that from the lens of me, who's a little bold and has a mental health background. And so I'm very quick to name the thing in the space. And that could be a big ask for a lot of folks. If there is space for you to, speak to a manager instead of having to speak directly to this person, if there is space for you to speak to colleagues who are sort of on that same field as you to gain perspective, see if there are better ways to sort of manage up in that way. But it's sensitive, and I want to really name that. That's an uncomfortable position to be in because the power play there is uncomfortable. And when I talk about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, that's not the kind of uncomfortable that I'm really thinking about. So I will let Nicole and other folks chime in as well.
Well, I was just going to add that I feel like sometimes you have to back end these conversations, right? So in my experience, if I find that I like to lead brave conversations frequently, and what I'll do is, if I know that there is an issue that we need to address, I may do it in a backhanded way of a training or a safe space conversation or a fireside chat. So, for example, we just had an amazing conversation for Transgender Visibility Awareness Day. And we had the trans coach, James Barnes. Shout out to James, who is remarkable. If you don't know him, he is phenomenal. Highly recommend him as a resource. But we've got to have a really powerful conversation, not just about his experience as a trans man, but we had an experience about the intersectionality between us, me as a Black woman, his experience as a white trans man. And we were able to talk about some of the elephants in the room when it comes to leadership, when it comes to how companies are showing up. So you can have the conversation, because for the person who raised this about their CEO, you can't help that person with their mental health. You can't bring that person along with you, but what you can do is bring the tools to them so that they can go and do that work that they need to do to repair, because it is not your job to help with their mental capacity for the work. You can lead them to how they can help themselves. So I just wanted you to take some the person who asked that, to take some onus off of you, because that's that person's journey and that's person's work. But you can create an environment where you can have those conversations in a safe and trusting way so that you can bring that person along.
Absolutely. And the next question, and Scott, I think I'll come to you with this one because it was picking up on the point that you were making about accountability. And I wonder how companies can measure success in this area. What needs to be set in place to show that it is working or not?
Yes. May I also comment on the previous one as well? Because I think I wanted to make there about accountability, as in there is a power imbalance, which can be really challenging when you're speaking to a CEO. But think about the CEO is still accountable to people, and in your company, they might perceive that as their board of directors. They may perceive it as the leadership team. I say the CEO is accountable to every single person in the organization. It's more a question of who do you think is the best place to have that conversation, who can come at it from an angle that's non-confrontational so that they can actually listen and then do something about it. And I do think this idea of how do you help them get out of that, I'm a CEO and I need to show up in a certain way, and move maybe just a little bit adjacent and be like, I needed to hear that feedback from my team because my job as a CEO is to make sure this business is successful. My business does not exist without my people feeling good and safe and like they can approach me. So, but yes, coming to the other one around like proving one's value back to the business. Data. I think that all ERGs, I think that they should be really well equipped in not just the moral case, but the business case. And everything that they do should be data-driven and evidence-based outcomes. It's really critical to collate both quantitative and qualitative data from your teams to show that, for example, something even like disclosure rates. So depending on what HR system you use, you'll be able to see how many of your employees actually feel comfortable sharing their ethnicity data, their disability status, their mental health status, their neurodivergence, their queerness, whatever it might be, with you as an organization, because that will give you a barometer of what are you going to do with my data, and can I actually trust you to make action off the back of it? So I think running, awareness campaigns around this functionality exists. If you share it with us, we will then deliver you these outcomes as a result. I think employee surveys are also quite important. That's something that we use consistently to be able to poll our people and ask them a series of questions that we then benchmark every 6 months, every 12 months and going on, in terms of, what is their feeling? What's their sense of belonging? Do they feel respected at work? Do they trust the communications coming out? Do they believe in the strategy? All these elements will actually sort of create an overall understanding of their experience. And what's important is, for the accountability point, is link leadership, remuneration, bonuses, etc. to those outcomes. That has been transformational because it is now a board level priority, and it's not a nice to have. That was DEI years ago. It's not that anymore. We can never go back there. We need to make sure that it's seen just as important as any other metric.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I know we have loads of questions. I'm sorry. I need
one more ad there. One more ad there. I'm sorry. I know. But just one more tool for y'all to use, because as Scott said, surveying is incredibly important. Another layer to that is that we added DE&I considerations into our review process, our annual review process. So there are questions directly in there about your contribution to DE&I and how you've shown up. Another accountability measure is seeing where leadership is showing up. You can track how your leadership is showing up to the events that you are putting on, and that's a KPI that they could be responsible for, in addition to what Scott said about their bonus consideration, et cetera, et cetera. So just wanted to add in that one layer of accountability too.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicole. And Mylis, I'm sorry, I'm handing over to you with a little bit of a delay, but we've got loads of questions, which is really good.
Thank you so much, all of you. I mean, I'm even just almost lost for words, to be fair, because there's so much that came up from this conversation. And I feel super privileged actually to be able to witness it, but also seeing the questions that came on the back of it. So definitely, I think a part 2, part 3, very much needed for all of this. But I'm really excited actually to share, I think, a couple of the key takeaways that came up. I think for me, really what stood out is this piece around, organizations having to really rediscover how they show up in front of social transformation. And I'll share my screen. I mean, it's just so much that's coming up for us. But as we do this process, I really invite everyone, and is one thing that was said in the session today, to take your empowerment, take your learning back to your workspace. take all of, what's coming up right now for you, some of these questions as well, and explore them with colleagues. As you can see here, this element around learning how to repair when things go wrong. It's difficult conversations that I think we're all able to do. And as you showed up today, we saw just that. So yeah, really, really a lot, as you can see on the screen here, that came up in that we're leaving. We'll be happy to share that with you all at the end. But one thing we'd like to close with, as we've got 1 more minute, is really inviting you to take the feedback survey that we put together. Really, we, I think, care a lot about making these events relevant for you all, so that they speak into some of your unique challenges, the ones that you're facing in your current jobs right now, as leaders, as change makers, but also as community builders. And so please take the survey, give us as much feedback as possible, and we'll do our best to integrate this into the next session.